So where in this journey did you start rejecting the KJV-Only standing position?
I would say probably about 5 years into the process, maybe around 1990.
Okay.
Yes. So what I did was, there's different levels of King James only. The most radical King James only people, and maybe it'll just be helpful to get an understanding of this for those who have not been exposed to the King James only movement, and especially the fringe parts of it. Some people just hold to King James only, believing it to be the best.
Right.
And that's like a really low level position in this movement. I'd have to say that's really probably the view that I grew up with as a child in the Independent Baptist Church I had. But along the way, especially in my teenage years, I began to become aware of a greater view, a different view, a stricter view of the King James only movement. And I began to be aware of it and started embracing it. Sort of the King James only movements with Peter Ruckman and others. And so let me give first of all that most extreme view. And the most extreme view of the King James only movement is that in 1611, God re-inspired the Word of God into English. And that the King James Version is not merely a translation. It is a re-inspiration of the Scriptures. The view has a lot of reasons why that was true. How that history had moved from a Greek dominant language to an English dominant language, and God re-inspired the Scriptures. And so there are those in the most extreme view that the King James is inspired by God. So much so that the strictest view, and that of Peter Ruckman, for instance, is that the King James Bible corrects the Greek. We correct even the original writings because re-inspiration brought greater purity. Great verse, the Word of God is purified 7 times, as gold and silver's, purified in a furnace of fire. So to the most extreme view, you have no consideration of Greek and Hebrew. None. Just the King James. And although I dabbled in that most extreme view, it's not where I ever really landed, that the King James was a new inspiration and it corrected Hebrew. So I did investigate. I've always investigated. What does Strong's Concordance say? What does the definition say? But more importantly, and what I didn't realize at the time, it was a concordant approach, a concordant spirit. That is, and when we say concordant, we mean that there's a consistency. If a Greek or Hebrew word is used in the Scriptures, it must be consistently translated. So what I would do is I would look beyond my English words that are in the King James Bible. I wasn't it to be critical of the King James Bible. I was doing it to gain understanding, to gain insight. So I would say, what is that Greek word here? And where else is it used in the New Testament? And I actually thought the discordant nature of the King James was an asset. I thought when the King James took the same Greek word and translated it 5 different ways, 15 different ways, that actually gave me synonyms of beautiful flavors and variations, not realizing that while some of that could be true, not realizing that at the core, it was distorting the precision of those words. And so that we couldn't get to the truth. So what I began to find out, like in the next 5 years of my study from 1985 to around 1990, I began to dawn just from my study of Greek words that they were inconsistently translated, distorting truth. Disastrously so. It took a long time, probably another 5 years, to have the boldness of faith to say, this translation is a distraction to the truth. And so to make that long story short, I would take the Strong's number and the Strong's word, look at every place that word showed up, and I would see something different than I had seen from merely reading the King James Bible. And I started looking at other translations. For the most part, they did the same kind of thing, but I would start to find the other translations sometimes valuable. And then, of course, I began to be attached to literal, translations. Rotherham, Young, Strong's, Devar, and where there was an attempt of some kind to be consistent. And where did I see that? Where did that really show up? It all showed up in my studies in the Salvation of All, for instance. Mm-hmm. And the mistranslation of eon or eonius, so the mistranslation of Sheol and Hades. And I'm going to say, okay. King James is not first and foremost a new inspiration. Second of all, it's not even the best translation. And thirdly, it actually can produce deception or reinforce deception already held. And then finally, it took a while because I'd been King James since I was a little boy, probably until 1985 when I got that first revelation. I don't even think I'd ever read another version, except where someone would point out how bad it was. And I'd use it as an example why the King James, I'd never even read another Bible, and now that's funny. That's because now the last 2 weekends I've spent nearly a week's worth of work time. Especially the week before last, I spent about 40 hours just reading. All I've been doing the last couple of weekends is reading Ephesians, the first 3 chapters of Ephesians, and I'm reading them in every version that I have, and I have how many? Over 100, I suppose. And that's my next stage in this process, to read every one, and it sort of mixes things up because I'm not used to the order of the words. I'm not used to the choice of the words. So I'm looking for things to go, what? What's that? You know, is somebody onto something or somebody hiding something? You know, but also I'm looking for ways, I'm looking for words to use in translation. And this is probably what you notice, Stephen, and those who are following us. In this preparation for the study Bible, what's happening is I'm trying to understand the word, what it means, what it doesn't mean, how it's distinct from other words. When I say that, I'm talking about Greek words. So that I get so full of that word, as full as I can be, with the realization God's granted me. And then when you can see the word, when you see what it's expressing, then you're thinking, what English word conveys that? What's the best English word that conveys that? You know? And a lot of times, and if, you know, and I know those of you who are following us on these videos, you'll know that when I'm discussing these words, I might read you 10, 20 English ways to say the word. And one thing I like about you, Steve, is, you know, you'll come along with a whole different word, you know, probably, you know, related to something more current or modern or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that says that.
So back on your journey a little bit, at the last conference, Mark Vogt was saying that he was years ago at some meeting and that you sang a song about the King James Version.
I had this song that was on the King James Bible. So I was known as the King James Bible song guy. Okay. So I would go to the meetings that we were involved in, because we were, you know, really until 1990, my whole life had been involved in groups that were only King James only. So even when I moved from Independent Baptist and I moved into Right Division, I moved into a Mid-Acts group. They were King James only. And so before almost any time I spoke at conferences and at churches, and I'd sing my King James Bible song first.
and in the King James Version, one of the things, for me anyhow, it seems like the thee and thou and the you and your kind of helped you decide whether it was a singular
Yes.
or a plural.
Yes.
Do any other translations do that?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
Okay.
Perhaps I'd have to look at that. Yeah, that's a great. People think that what's happening there, it's just like an archaic way of saying things.
Yeah.
And even though it is archaic, because we don't do that today, you are actually able to distinguish between the singular you and, you know, plural you. And now there are ways, you know, it sounds, thee and thou sound, we're used to you,
Right?
not ye. That, you know, that seems archaic. But thee and thou, so that almost sounds religious, you know. We talk to thee, O God, you know, and so, but there is there's a way in translations, which we will seek to do without using thee and thou, although we'll bring it up probably in reference, you know, that this was a part of translation principles in the past that actually helped you understand a passage. The new birth of John chapter 3, it's really essential that you get the pronouns, the singular and plural pronouns right, and then the passage will open right up for you.
Right.
But there's a way to do that. One way I've thought of in that we've done in the past with our work on the Bible Students version is to put a little subscript P by you if it's plural, or maybe we could put an S if it was singular. I don't know. Some way to do that. Obviously, we'll put it down in the notes, but just some way to do that.
You could use the Lancaster County vernacular and just use.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Or the Pittsburgh Yins. Yins.